something you always thought was normal, but really wasn't. Story 1, synesthesia. Is see sound as pretty fireworks all the time. I thought that the reason chalk on a blackboard made everyone in class cringe was because they were seeing the bright, blinding blue light it produced that I saw. Edit, sorry if I have missed any of your questions. My app isn't displaying all my unread inbox. Feel free to PM any I've missed. Story 2, I grew up in Philadelphia. Every Christmas we would go over to a neighbor's house and open all the presents under their Christmas tree. At the time, my dad told me that while we were doing this, our neighbors were at our house doing the same thing. It turns out that we were just breaking into people's houses and stealing their presents. Story 3, I grew up in Pittsburgh. For those of you that haven't been there, Pittsburgh has a whole vocabulary of words that are commonly used and accepted in the area, but aren't used anywhere else. After I moved away for college, I began to learn that others don't refer to a bush with thorns as a jagger bush or rubber bands as gum bands. No one described a nosy person as nebby and wouldn't fathom addressing a group as yins. Every time this happened, it was always a bit of shock that a word I had accepted for years didn't exist 100 miles away. Story 4, I thought brownies were supposed to be really gooey in the middle. It turns out that my mom baking brownies in the microwave resulted in severely undercooked brownies. Story 5, not looking at your own body in a mirror. I grew up in a religious family, and I was told that looking at naked people was wrong. I thought this counted for your own body Oswell. So I literally spent around 14 years of my life never looking at my completely naked body in a mirror. Story 6, I really can't think of anything. I guess I'm just a normal guy. I wake up, put my pants on one leg at a time in the shower, and go to work. Edit, to everyone telling me to before I put my pants on, I've considered it and elected to keep with my current routine. First of all, I don't ruin my pants because I've cut holes in every pair. Second, without my pants, my legs would get all wet in the shower. And then I'd have to spend more time drying off. It would throw off my whole morning routine. Story 7, I can make my eyes shake really fast. And until I was 8, I didn't realize that other people could actually see my eyes vibrating. I thought it was all in my head. Story 8, I only recently learned that a colander has a real name. My grandmother used to call it the macaroni stay water go. So that's what I called it as well. This is what happens when you spend most of your childhood with an Italian immigrant. Story 9, calling remote control box. I think it was just because my dad couldn't ever remember what it was called and was basically calling it that rectangle-shaped thing out of frustration, and my mom probably just thought it was funny and adopted it too. 21 years later, I was all like, hey dude, pass me the box. The what? The box. I had no idea that it was a made-up term. Story 10, English isn't my mom's first language, so I grew up calling those things that you put on your table to protect it from hot plates, what she called them, underplaters. 23 years later, I hear someone telling me to pass a trivet and had zero idea what they were talking about. Turns out they have a name. Edit, turns out that the name for that thing pretty much translates to underplate in a ton of languages. Story 11, sporks. When I was younger, we had these sporks, and they were awesome. I never realized until I moved out that sporks were expensive, and the only reason we had them was because my mom had stolen them from elementary school. They were metal sporks. Edit, please put down your sporks. Story 12, I see colorful, moving dots everywhere, at all times, eyes open or closed. I thought everyone saw like this until I was in high school. Edit, what I have is called visual snow. Here are a few examples. Image, another image link with lots of images. Simulation mine is colorful. Full spectrum of colors. Some people just have white. I met a few with just red too. Story 13, being extremely possessive about mugs. Just mugs, not any other dishes or silverware in my family. Each person has one or more mugs, and you do not drink out of another person's mug. Even if it's clean, I didn't realize this wasn't normal until my friend started drinking out of my mug, as if it was okay. Story 14, this is going to sound really gross, but up until age 8, I threw away my used toilet paper into the garbage in the bathroom. Looking back, I can't believe I did that, but my mom is from the Philippines, and I've heard that is what they do in countries with bad plumbing. I stopped when my friend came over and called me weird for doing that. Story 15, homosexuality being acceptable. I have a very diverse, open, and accepting family, and had no idea that homosexuality was as controversial as it until I was around 16, 17. That made me sad. Story 16, well, I always ate instant noodles without boiling them. I opened the pack, poured the flavor in, scrambled the package, and ate them raw. In my hometown, many people did it, but apparently when I told other people of that in a different town, they were like, what? Story 17, this is going to sound completely ridiculous, but I swear that a guy really thought for years that everyone fantasized about making out with other guys all the time. So obviously I had the same thoughts about girls, so my thought process was something along the lines of, well, I like girls, so I'm clearly not gay. Oh, I must be straight, and everyone must have these thoughts. It legitimately took until I was 15 or 16 before I finally learned that most guys do not have dreams about sexy times with other dudes, saying a prayer before every meal. I was raised Mormon, so I'd say a prayer before every meal, blessing the food and thanking God for it in waitivs. I went to a friend's house to eat once, and I was so confused when everyone just started eating as soon as the food came. I've always had to wait for the whole family to sit down, and then we could only start after the prayer. Story 18 Murder. Growing up, I thought murder was normal, tragic, but just something that happens like cancer. It wasn't until I got to college that I realized most people didn't know anyone that was murdered. Story 19. I always thought the correct way to pronounce store names that are someone's surname was in the possessive. Kroger's instead of Kroger, Myers instead of Meyer. I'm a Michigan native. But it's been 4 years, and I still mispronounce business names. Acme's, Wawa's, and so forth. Edit. I love Reddit because I can make a post about my ridiculous accent and get a history lesson in return. Karma indeed. Story 20. For years, I thought Kitty College was the grade before kindergarten. I thought everyone went to Kitty College. Took me years to realize that was just the name of my preschool. Story 21. I thought the sayings my family used were normal until my wife told me otherwise. The end of the stick, a shitload of stuff, shit in one hand, and one in another. I guess my dad just likes the word. Quick edit. No, my dad is not Leahy. He's been saying all of this since the 80s, well before that TV show. I told my wife that she was the weird one, but she said they're all different sayings. Short into the stick, shipload of stuff, one in one hand and spit in the other. Story 22. I grew up sharing a bed with my mother. Because we could only afford a small one-bedroom apartment when I was younger, my father lived elsewhere. We can now afford a 3-bedroom apartment. I have my own bedroom. I still share a bed with my mother. We just gotten used to it. She gets nightmares otherwise. I didn't realize it was a big deal until I mentioned it to a friend. Female here. So y'all don't get any weird ideas? Story 23. I used to think that everybody loves brainstorming random big picture ideas. A lot of people actually really don't care about that at all. It's actually very boring to them. People consider that being stuck with your head in the clouds because it's typically irrelevant to the immediate situation at hand. They don't care even if the immediate situation is boring. They'd rather you made the situation unboring rather than bring up something abstract. I used to be that guy. Don't be that guy, unless you're around like-minded people who enjoy that sort of thing. Just remember we're in the minority. Story 24. The things you put on your feet at home to keep them warm are called poupons. Apparently, everyone who is not descended from French Canadians call them slippers. Story 25. Putting butter on Pop-Tarts. I come from a chubby family, and this is how we always did it. But my friends looked at me like I was nuts the first time they saw me do it. If you haven't tried it, it's pretty dope. Story 26. The way my mother made burritos. She basically made a chimichanga, though she called it a burrito, meat, cheese, and beans wrapped in a flour tortilla folded on itself, much like an enveloped, and then fried it in the skillet. The first time I had a real burrito, I wondered why they hadn't cooked it. And I forgot to add the part where she fried in a pan. Story 27. That people get headaches if they eat too much cheese or ice cream. Turns out I'm lactose intolerant. My friends looked at me like I was crazy after dinner when I said, God, this cheese headache won't go away. Story 28. I'm stereo blind, which essentially means that I don't see in 3D. I have no depth perception. I had no idea that the world wasn't flat looking at everyone else. No wonder I sucked at sports as a kid. Story 29. It's not necessarily a I thought it was normal situation, but more of an innocent misunderstanding. I used to pronounce Caesar as it was visually spelled like Kesar. So whenever we go for pizza, we were cheap back then we would go for Little Caesars, which I pronounced as Little Kesar. I'm at the age of 20, and my parents still insist on calling it Little Kesar, just to tease me. It's all in good fun, and the pizza still tastes good. Story 30. For the longest time, I thought it was totally normal for everyone to wonder what it was like to be the other gender. I don't mean just a casual, oh, that'd be interesting type wonder, but more of a constant, always their persistent thought. Turns out this isn't quite normal. Story 31. I called flip-flops thongs where I grew up, moved to where it wasn't, and went to a pool party. I lost my flip-flops and proceeded to ask all my friends if they'd seen my thongs. Really awkward as it took me asking like 3 people for them to figure out I meant something else. Story 32. When I was a kid, I always thought everyone was required to go to college. It wasn't until I was about 10 or 11 years old that I found out that most people don't, and that you have to pay for it. Story 33. When I was young and just discovering the joys of masturbation, I would rub the head of through my briefs. This eventually led to all of my underwear developing holes in the front. No one ever called me on the holes, so I just carried on until I got to about the 5th grade, when I learned how to off correctly. You asked for it, there you have it. I was a very strange child. Edit punctuation. Story 34. My first child was nearly deaf due to a weird deformity at birth that caused his ears and all his sinus cavities to be constantly full of fluid, and didn't speak until he had corrective surgery at the age of 3. My second child didn't have the same problem, and when he started talking at a year, I seriously thought I needed to call a priest. It was freaky. He had the creepiest Furby voice. Story 35. I associate numbers and months of the year with colors, as well as certain time periods. I get looked at like I am crazy whenever I tell people X30 to 39 would be a deep emerald green. July is a scarlet red color. 1900 to 1969 is a darker forest green. Edit. After heavy research, hard work, and a ton of replies, I have in fact confirmed that I have synesthesia. Story 36. In my country, the electricity cuts off multiple times a day, and you can't use a lot of things at once, like a microwave and a washing machine at the same time, or it will cut off even more. And I didn't know this was not normal until I saw people freaking out in movies when there was a power outage. Story 37. My parents used to give me gross store-bought garden burgers and told me that's what hamburgers tasted like. I didn't have a real burger until I was 14 or 15, and it blew my freaking mind. Story 38. Having shouting matches to resolve any and every argument. Wasn't until college and people treated me like a crazy person that I realized my family wasn't normal. Story 39. A bit late, but I thought that every day people had to sit down and write a lot to make their handwriting good. I didn't, so that's why I thought my handwriting was bad. Apparently I have dysgraphia, which is basically dyslexia for your hands. Think of it as chronic bad handwriting. Just being able to write with good handwriting is foreign to me. How do you freaks make straight lines? Story 40. Sleeping butt naked almost every night. Didn't know that was abnormal until an AskReddit thread a few weeks back, and then I asked some of my friends. Had no idea that most people wear clothing while they're sleeping every single night. Story 41. Started masturbating at 7. I knew exactly what I was doing. I also found out shortly after that I knew more about the female anatomy than any of the girls my age. I researched things that interest me. I had just got my first computer, dial-up LOL days. Also, I stole from my older brothers. Oddly enough, I don't see myself as very... It's caused problems in past relationships. Story 42. Growing up, my parents, who would later divorce, surprise, were never affectionate, and I had honestly never seen a real kiss or loving moment outside of stage pictures. I remember going over to my best friend's house and seeing her parents sit on the couch with a glass of wine after dinner, snug and happy. I found it absolutely uncomfortable and practically inappropriate. It was like seeing two adults make out heavily in front of me. Later, I realized most married couples like each other. Story 43. I wipe and then immediately wash my after shitting. It was only until grade school that I realized people just wipe. It really grossed me out that just wiping was acceptable. To each their own, I guess. Story 44. I thought that yanking your child's hair was an acceptable form of punishment and much better than swatting a kid's behind in public, because it doesn't leave a bruise. Yeah, took me till I was 26 and telling my usual joke about how I had great hair cause mom pulled it so hard when I misbehaved as a kid. Also, the PA Dutch were really into spare the rod, spoil the child. Even into the early 1970s, I was just glad to not get the switch. Ever my coworkers' loud gasp and gape-mouthed staring at me was like, oh, yeah, it hurt because that's kind of abusive, and I guess I'm not tender-headed. Story 45. Diluting drinks with water. My family grew up poor, so when one day I had a friend over, he gave me the strangest look when I poured tap water in his apple juice. To this day, nearly all beverages taste too sweet to me. Story 46. When I first started masturbating, I rubbed my against the inside of my thigh. I'm not sure how old I was when I graduated to jerking it like normal people. Story 47. When I lived in Paris, France, in middle school lycée, the guys wore argyle patterns on their socks because it was the cool thing to do. When I moved to the USA in high school, wearing argyle socks was like walking around within my mouth. Story 48. I wake in the middle of the night face down on my pillow, unable to breathe or move. As my mind gets more and more desperate for air, I jolt fully awake, gasping for air. I used to think it happened to everyone, but dumbfounded family told me otherwise. It's called sleep paralysis or something. Edit. I could breathe if I wasn't being suffocated by the pillow. I'm fully conscious. I just can't move. I can't yell or move any part of my body, even though I'm trying as hard as I can. It's happened so many times I now know what's going on. My body doesn't snap out of it till I'm out of oxygen. I'm sorry. It's kind of hard to explain. Story 49. Eating dinner with the family. I can't tell you how many friends of mine eat every meal in their rooms or at scattered times. I was raised that dinner time is at the dinner table, without a TV playing, without phones out, and as a family. Story 50. Mine is a lot less interesting. But growing up, my grandfather always had a nail clippers in his pocket. His sons were the same way from age 5 or 6 until sometime in high school. I always had one on me, still do, in my pocket as I write this. Surprisingly useful in everyday life. I also always have a knife. matches, and an extra shoestring. Being prepared is pretty cool, I think. Story 51. Growing up, I thought that it was odd how other people's parents looked like they could be their grandma or grandpa. Turns out when your mom got pregnant at 15, you're just used to young parents. Up until I turned 12, I thought people with parents 30 years older than them were weird and felt sorry for them because they would have old people as parents that much sooner. Story 52. I'm male. I didn't know I'd been circumcised as a baby until I was 17. You can guess what that did to me. Edit okay, fine. Mostly just so that's why other people have more foreskin. Oh. Story 53. Thinking to myself in plural. Apparently it's supposed to be I need to brush my teeth. I need to do blah blah, etc. I think we need to brush our teeth. We needed a blah blah, etc. I don't have any split personality or anything like that though. I'm not going to pretend like I understand psychology. That's just what I've always done. Story 54. You know those little chunks of hardened bread on salads. I thought they were called bread nuggets until I was 18 and learned the word croutons. The person who introduced me to the word was astonished that I had made it so far in life without knowing there was a proper word for them. Story 55. I attach almost all memories to images of random places to recall them correctly. I don't do this on purpose. It's just simply not possible to do calculus without remembering the street sign at the end of my block or where I park my car without thinking back to the strip mall 2 towns over. The strange thing is that they're all categorized like math is typically street corners. Music is nature trails. Programming is restaurants. I always assumed everyone did this because how else do you organize your thoughts? Story 56. When having falling dreams, I will sometimes hit the ground in the dream. There's a Far Side cartoon that made reference to what happens when you hit. I couldn't figure out the joke until someone explained to me that everyone wakes up before you hit the ground. Well, almost everyone. Story 57. Apparently, it's not normal to put noodles in when you make chili. That's how my mom and her mom make it. So, I never knew until this year when I started making my own, and my roommate made fun of me. Story 58. I have eye floaters like everyone else. But when I stare at a blank white surface or an overcast sky, I see little the same texture as floaties that move quickly around my field of vision, seemingly randomly. I also get a dark blue and black wrinkling similar to the color blobs you get when you run your eyes too hard towards the center of my vision when staring at blank surfaces. Story 59. I can subluxate my shoulder at will. It does not hurt, but considering my family's history with connective tissue issues, I probably should not be doing it. I did not realize others could not until someone threw up when they saw me do it. Story 60. When I get relatively tired, I basically get high. Always thought this happened to everyone until I started having sleepovers and being asked if I was on drugs. Story 61. Waking up several times during the night. And it may be normal, I'm not so sure, but everyone I've ever asked says that they usually sleep soundly through the night. Like I wake up at least 5 times during the night while sleeping. I do take medication for it, but it only helps a little. I just want to sleep through the night. Story 62. Up until I was 8, my parents had me shower in tandem with my brothers. I'm also a male for the purpose of conserving water. I thought this was normal until I mentioned it casually in school and was informed it was not. Story 63. Getting married at 18 and having at least 6 kids, or people wonder about your fertility. I'm 22 and almost a spinster in my religious community. Good thing I'm not marrying one. Story 64. Depression. On paper, my life is pretty good, so I thought I had nothing to be unhappy about. But that's the thing about depression, an explanation isn't always necessary. Story 65. My dad was a career Marine and my mom's dad was in the Navy for 30 years. Consequently, it was only after I learned to read and started reading books did I actually realize that anther people called bulkheads walls, decks were floors, overheads were ceilings, hatches were doors, scuttlebutts were drinking fountains, and heads were bathrooms. Story 66. I made it to 7th grade before having it revealed to me that everyone on Earth is not. When my classmates began to tell me most people strictly prefer whiners or clams, I thought I was surely being with. Story 67. I always thought the huge bump of extra bone on the roof of my mouth was normal until I went to the dentist a couple months ago, and they said something about it. I guess it's called palatal tori, and this is what it looks like. Story 68. M from the north of England. And apparently no one knows the phrase, put you on, meaning that food will keep you going until a meal, as in have a snack. ITLL, put you on till dinner. Story 69. I always believed that the marks you get on your skin after you sit against something for a while were called nubbles. Turns out my big sister made it up. Still think it's pretty fitting though. Story 70. Until last year, I thought visualizing was just one of those words people use that didn't mean what it sounded like. I literally am incapable of conjuring up an image inside my head. I can certainly know what something is supposed to look like, but I am not capable of imagining, remembering, or otherwise conjuring up anything using a visual mental representation any more than I could conjure up an accurate sensation of burning my hand purely from the imagination. I still think that everyone else actually visualizing and really seeing something inside their head is a practical joke society's playing on me. Story 71, children and parents kissing on the mouth and holding hands until 16 not. I was just raised doing those things, so I didn't give a second thought. Story 72, I also thought it was normal to be totally and completely sheltered. The first time I met a Mexican person, I was in high school, and I thought they were just really tan until someone explained it to me. My dad was rich, and so in my experience, they were just the tan people who worked in our private gated community. It's sad to think about now, how naive and sheltered I was because my parents didn't want to expose me to anything. Story 73, I have tinnitus, so I always hear ringing in my ears unless it's masked by other noise. I always thought it was normal to hear that. Nope, as a result, I don't actually know what silence sounds like. Story 74, when I was growing up, everyone in my family said refrigerator as refrigerator. It wasn't until I got to the 5th grade that someone told me the extra F was wrong. Story 75, I can push my pupils up into my skull so that only the whites of my eyes can be seen. I thought it was normal because it's so easy for me. But then I showed some friends at college, and they freaked me out. They said they thought I'd been possessed or something. Story 76, if I get any sort of water in my nose, I lose the ability to breathe through it for a few minutes if I get water in my eyes. It hurts like if I open them, rendering me temporarily blind. I thought this was normal until I was 13, when I found out other people don't cover their face when showering. Story 77, I wake up routinely in the middle of the night with anxiety nightmares. I also have this during the day along with nail-biting fun, and it's agonizing. I can't remember my work schedule even after looking at it, so I freak out about what days I have to work even on days when I'm not working yet. It's weird. Normally, I have to check at least 3 times to slow down my panicky heartbeat. I have trouble falling asleep at night thinking about everything I need to do during the week seems fairly normal, and then I spend hours up working because I can't sleep. Teaching is my first job, working retail to support myself on the side. I have basically assumed that most of these behaviors are normal for most of my adult life, but it's likely that I have an anxiety disorder, which is a shame because I can't afford treatment, all the delights of adulthood. Story 78, realizing not every country had free healthcare was actually a big shocker to me. Later realizing that in some countries they don't have it, because people think it's a bad idea, made me go what even more, poor confused first world country citizen. Story 79, abuse. I thought that how my family worked was how all families worked. Turns out abuse, at least at the level it was in my home, isn't normal. Being taken away from my parents by social services probably should have been a dead giveaway. Story 80, racism. I grew up traveling the world, so I was used to seeing people of every color. It wasn't until middle school that I realized racism was a thing. I remember the teacher was talking about racists, and I stopped to ask what a racist was, and everyone looked shocked. Story 81, growing up, my family would share food constantly, would eat off each other's plates and drink from each other's glasses without asking, and it was never a big deal. Turns out, not everybody does that. Story 82, I dated a girl for a while. Through the normal talk and being open, I found out that she was molested by her father. He had been doing things to her from such a young age. So in the 6th grade, when the teachers were telling the class that this bad, and you should report it, she was blown away. She thought all little girls did this with their fathers, just normal life. Story 83, every time I eat apple, strawberries, bananas, most every fruit, it gets really itchy in the back of my throat. So I can't eat too much of these or else I get an itchy throat all day. The only way of reaching the itch is with my fingers, but it almost makes me puke, or with the back of my tongue. Have you ever tried scratching an itch inside your mouth with your tongue? Almost impossible. The tongue is too soft to do a 100 scratch, so I'm stuck for hours until it ended the 90 scratched itch. But I digress. I thought everybody had that and that I was being so I just ate fruits anyway. I think I have a minor allergy, but haven't checked that out. Story 84, until I got older, I thought that everyone's dad was abusive and very physical, like that's just part of life. So I always tensed up when my friend parents started yelling at them. Then I learned that he was just Story 85, forgetting if you're right or left-handed. My friend just told me the other day it wasn't normal, or as he put it, were you deprived of oxygen at birth? Another one, I guess I didn't look in a mirror enough for a long time growing up because I couldn't recognize myself in photos, or I did, but I was always shocked at how I looked. I still do get surprised here and there, but I also can't vision faces in my head, just really bad at it. Story 86, my mom raised me and my siblings to call eye boogers bacon bits. And this one time at school in the 3rd or 4th grade, me and some other kid were talking about our morning routines. And I said, yeah, And I hate it when I wake up with bacon bits. The other kids look confused. Bacon bits, they asked. Yeah, bacon bits. Like around your eyes and stuff. I replied. Everyone burst into laughter, and I was left like you. At the light when you really need to sneeze to help push it out. The crazy looks I get. Story 87, I may be late on this thread, but when I was younger, my mom used to call quesadillas cheese floppies. However, she never told me that they were actually called quesadillas, so I grew up believing they were just cheese floppies. Then I had a very rude awakening when I was 10 years old at a Qdoba. Even though my mom fooled me, I still call them cheese floppies. The name especially gave the serving staff at my university a big laugh when I attempted to order one at dinner one night, using the nickname instead. Story 88 Reddit makes me think it's not normal to nod in my shower. Gross. Drink whilst eating, like I take a sip while I still have good in my mouth, and then I chew it a bit, then swallow. Thought this was normal till my girlfriend laughed at me. Story 89, very late in the game here, but until I was 15, I thought it was normal for urine to become dark brown before my period started. Kind of like a warning. Nope, my kidneys were just up on me. Story 90, people remembering something you like and giving it to as a gift. Variant being given something that you asked for. Example, my family didn't really exchange gifts for Christmas and birthdays, and even now I feel weird spending Christmases with people who have huge, elaborate gift exchanges. I'm talking like piles of presents in front of each person, and each gift is something very specific and sometimes very high-end. Like if someone asked for a pair of Victoria's Secret pajamas, they would actually get them. If they liked a certain kind of perfume, that's what they got. I'm still baffled and touched whenever a friend remembers that I liked a certain thing and buys that for me as a present, and I will cry every single time. Story 91, I put my pajamas behind my pillow on my bed during the day when they're not in use. My family has always done this, and I just recently found out from my girlfriend that this is not normal and is in fact very weird. Story 92, I can twist my ankles completely sideways without hurting, and I usually do it while sitting at a desk. I didn't think much of it until one of my teachers did a double take and told me they thought I was injured. I get a lot of people saying it's gross if I do it in front of them too, which just makes me do it more. Story 93, I'm sure a lot of Asian people can relate. My family is Korean. I knew we did things a little different from American families. We ate different foods, celebrated different holidays, etc. But what I didn't know was that some American families don't take off their shoes when they enter their home. Cue in the first time I went to a friend's house, and I take off my shoes. No one noticed I took off my shoes, but I noticed that everyone else didn't take off their shoes. Friend's mom, what happened to your shoes? Story 94, being Japanese and Korean, I always and still do take my shoes off before going in the house. I went to visit some relatives in Colorado when I was little, and I was appalled that they wore their shoes indoors. Edit TIL, taking off your shoes before you enter one's house isn't just an Asian thing. Story 95, when I was young, I fell out of bed a lot. So I ended up with just a mattress and box spring on the floor, so I somehow got in the habit of waking up and standing up and walking out of bed, and this seemed totally normal to me. In my 20s, I was at a typical house party where people just crashed wherever, and a few people saw me stand up and walk out of bed, and they joked with me about it all morning, and I honestly didn't see the weirdness of it till then, but I still do it sometimes, lol. Story 96, when I was a little, I used to get completely naked before I took. Even when I started school, I would take off all of my clothes, put it behind the toilet, and do my business. I didn't stop until someone found out about it, and the elementary school had a huge meeting with my parents. I thought it was pretty normal. Story 97, I always thought that people saw numbers and letters as having genders, personalities, and colors, and that books and songs all had colors attached to them. I didn't find out until I was in my early 20s when I made a passing comment to my midwife that I found out that I actually have ordinal linguistic personification and its closely related condition grapheme color synesthesia. Story 98, I'm a pretty light sleeper to the point where I can hear everything while still sleeping, and if someone talks to me, I can answer their questions appropriately. Sometimes it's because whatever I hear becomes part of my dream, though sometimes I can sleep response without knowing I did. Either way, I thought all light sleepers could do this since my family would talk to me when I'm asleep, like asking where something is and etc. However, I found out it was not normal when I came to college. Story 99, disbelief in evolution, homophobia, homeschooling. Then I moved out and realized that my parents were kind of insane. I've been so much happier since I lost my faith, though, to be honest, and if I ever have children, they will not be homeschooled. Story 100, telling jokes on Halloween to get candy. It's only a St. Louis thing, apparently, but barely anyone here knows that. When you tell someone other people in America don't tell jokes on Halloween, their reply will be what? How do they get their candy here? When you're a kid, it's a big deal to think of good jokes, and if your friend goes before you and steals yours, it's unforgivable. Story 101, I have almost debilitating eidetic memory. I actually take medications because I get overwhelmed with images that never leave. As a result, I have a crazy accurate short-term and long-term memory. Even with the meds, I am basically doped up 247 because if I wasn't, the entire day would play on loop. I can still function when I'm rewinding. It just gives me massive migraines. I thought everyone remembered things as pictures or videos. I never lose anything because I can remember exactly what was next to it. The events leading up to me choosing that particular spot for it. And anytime I walked past it and glanced at it, I have been the subject of many medical journals and am now being pestered about my 5-year-old and my newborn. My son has an incredible memory for being 5 years old, but I will not subject them to the same BS tests I had to go through. The docs don't want to help. They want to probe and test. I am not a guinea pig. I just want to function at a normal level. Also, I am nothing like Raymond. He was an idiot savant with an eidetic memory. There's a difference